Hello and welcome to the Gang Culture Podcast, a series educating you about gang culture. Whether you're listening at home, school, or on the way to work, we hope you can enjoy listening and learn something to share with others.
Hi, I'm Scott Michaels from The Cause, and you're listening to Gang Culture. Today we have a very special episode. Throughout this first season, we made sure we asked many of our guests questions about women and women's role in gangs. A lot of times, gangs are thought to be a men's game. Well, we think you might be surprised or learn something from the answers that our guests gave when it came down to women involved in gangs. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this compilation show all about women in gangs.
I have a question. What role do females usually hold in gangs?
It's changed. There are some actually gang members, female gang members that are high up in the organization.
Yes.
It used to be a time when gang members, female gang members, were sexed in sometimes,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And now it's more like they're beat in.
Mm.
It's not as much as of that, because I had an opportunity to speak with an ex-gang member, female, and I was asking those questions.
Right.
Because I remember back in the 80s and 90s, it was that for the female
Right.
members, but now it's starting to be kind of like the males.
And one of the crazy statistics I saw recently was that the amount of women joining gangs was increasing crazy. Like, it blew my mind when I saw the numbers. Are there different types? What are the differences in types of crimes committed by female gang members compared to male gang members, if you know of any?
Right now, they're absolutely the same.
And I would think so.
In essence, you know.
Yes.
It's unfortunate, but that's exactly what you kind of like could see society kind of going that way, because girls started to imitate the males.
Yes.
And it's continuing to go that way.
Are there any challenges or obstacles for women that face in the gang culture?
Well, there's always kind of like a disadvantage for females in this world, you know, because there's so many things that can happen, and it can
Yes.
happen to males too, but females are usually not as strong as male victims are. So there's a lot of things that are quite different for females when they try to get in a certain position. You still have to think about, can you hold yourself?
Right. What are the consequences for women who want to leave or distance themselves from the gang? Is it basically similar to the guys?
Well, kind of similar, because this one young lady I was speaking with, it was almost like you had to pay somebody to kind of get you out of the game, or try to keep you a little bit protected. It's kind of quite intricate now.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do women typically gain respect or status within a gang? Would you say women can gain status in the gang?
Absolutely. I think they gain status by using things like possibly crimes that are being committed, you know. I'm not going to list any type of crimes because I don't want to, you know, glorify anything.
Of course.
So I just think by the levels of crimes that they might commit could possibly be an up in the gang.
Okay. Are there any stereotypes or misconceptions about women in gangs that you'd like to address?
It's not the way it used to be. I mean, it's more almost like even in sense of some of the things that the girls are doing.
Can you give me an example of something like that?
Well, you know, stealing the car,
Right.
maybe shooting somebody,
Right.
things like that.
Wow. That's interesting. It's frightening and interesting at the same time. Well, once again, I want to thank you for your input. I want to thank you for the abundance of information that you've shared with us and just allowing us to know a part of you and sharing some of the things that you've done. It's been a pleasure being here to interview you. Well, I don't want to say interview, having a conversation with you.
I like that
Yes,
conversation.
a conversation, and I appreciate it. And I welcome you back to our next episode, whenever that may be. Feel free to come. So, Mr. Cupchick, I have a question for you. What in your estimation, what role do females usually hold in gangs, from your knowledge?
You know, it's a tough question to answer in the sense that it varies so much.
Yes.
Right. You know, I think if you go back a generation, certainly there were fewer girls in gangs relative to boys than there are today, and they tend to be more subservient, kind of like, you know, secondary members, and so there's more equality in gangs by and large now. But it's hard to answer because gangs aren't one thing, right?
Yes.
Different types of gangs in different places with different structures, and it varies. It varies a lot.
Do you think the reasons for joining gangs is different for males and females, or do you think it's similar?
I mean, it can be similar. I think there are some similarities, but one thing, when you look at girls and any kind of delinquency, really, there's an important thing to consider, which is different histories of victimization.
Yes.
You see, girls are far more likely to be victims of abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse in their homes.
Yes.
I mean, far more likely than boys.
Yes.
And, you know, too often what happens is that girls then, well, you know, they do what they have to do to survive, which often means running away, which in and of itself is a crime.
Yes.
Right? You're a runaway now. Well, you're truant, you're a runaway. And then once you run away, you got to get by, you got to survive.
Right.
And so how do you support yourself? Often through criminal activity. Right? So just by doing what they can to survive, by being strong in one sense, right?
Right.
Girls are criminalized, right? Feminist criminologists call it, criminalization of survival strategies is the kind of fancy term they often use for it, right? and that's what, that's kind of how far more for girls than for boys, how they enter into, whether it be gangs or other forms of, or delinquency or the juvenile justice system. So not every girl in a gang has that path. You know, some join for the same reasons that boys do.
Right.
But often girls are more likely to join a gang or do other forms of behavior that we're not very fond of, because of they're trying to survive.
Right. Can you discuss any challenges or obstacles that you think women face in the gang culture? Is there anything that stands out?
I mean, gangs can often be very, toxic masculine places, right?
Yes.
And so, not every girl in a gang is going to have that experience, but I think the challenges for them can be much higher sometimes than for boys.
Wow. What are some of the consequences for women who want to leave or distance themselves from the gang? Do you think that you can think of?
I mean, it varies a lot. I think that the old school, certainly there are some gangs where there are penalties for wanting to leave, but I mean, the research on gangs suggests that that's more of kind of to a large extent, I don't want to say outdated, but for many, an outdated concept. If you don't want to be part of a group, the group probably doesn't want you.
Right. How do you think women typically gain respect or status within a gang? Do you think women get status within a gang?
Sure. I think that, again, just like outside of gangs, right? It's a tougher road for them to gain status than it is for boys. They have a steeper hill to climb.
Yes.
Right? But they can.
Right.
They can. By and large, same ways that boys do, right? By being, supportive of your friends. Sometimes that's through criminal activity. Sometimes that's by, just backing up your peers.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any stereotypes or misconceptions about women in gangs that you'd like to address?
I think the old school idea is that girls are just subservient to boys, right? That they're more feminine and so on, and the girls who join gangs. And, I think that that's pretty much a stereotype.
Right.
And again, that doesn't mean that their experience isn't different than boys who join gangs. But they're girls who are in gangs tend to be gang members.
Yes.
Full-fledged.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. I appreciate you sharing that insight with us. Once again, it's a pleasure having you in Gangs, Myths, and Realities, and I look forward to working with you down in the future.
Thank you so much for having me on here.
No.
What role do females usually hold in gangs? Is there specific roles, or are they able to do just about anything in a gang, or are there some sort, are there systems? Does anyone know?
Well, I have a personal story when I first became a member of the Bloods, I was unaware of some of the culture, and as they say, flagging. I was flagging on the wrong side, and I was walking a couple blocks away from my house.
Could you tell us what flagging means?
Flagging is the color that represents your gang.
Okay.
The Bloods would be a red bandana, and this day I had the red bandana in the left side of my pocket, which would mean that's not our side, that's the Crip side. So I was walking, enjoying my day, and I heard a yell from across the street, and it was a female. And me thinking I was cute, she was trying to get with me. And when she walked up to me, she said, "What set you claim?" And I was taken back because it was a female. And I almost didn't take her serious. And as I kind of hesitated with my answer, she pulled out a knife. And then I started to react. And I told her who, at the time, my big homie was, my big brother. And she was like, because he was well known in the neighborhood, she was like, "He let you walk around like this? You know you flagging on the wrong side?" And honestly, she scared me. So my point is, the females in the gangs are, from what I know, very aggressive. It's like they have something to prove. You know, they may have boyfriends that initiated them, brothers. So from my experience, very aggressive. Females are very aggressive. And a lot of times, they're the ones pulling the trigger. So, because they can kind of fly under the radar, lure. So, just me spreading that, I just wanted to spread that awareness that don't take it for granted just because it's a female, that she won't be as aggressive as a male.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've had some conversations with some female ex-gang members, or maybe gang members now, and they basically, what you just said is absolutely true. It's, yeah, they're just as aggressive, and they have seen and done some of the same things that some male members have done. They'll say things like, you find someone in the river doesn't mean they just like drowned, you know.
I mean, I'll just take it back to the history of women in the world. First and foremost, shout out to all women from all cultures, races and everything. But I'm going to speak to those from the African diaspora. When you talk about, Queen Cleopatra and Nzinga, when you talk about, Sada Shakur, you're talking about, Rosa Parks and whoever else, you know what I mean? All the women throughout our history have had to be just as strong, if not stronger, than men. So that sort of inner, feeling and sort of inner, thing that's intrinsic within women just extends into the gang culture as well. You talk about leadership, in corporations and so on and so forth and whatnot. So all those elements are definitely present throughout the history, but also speaks to their involvement in gang culture. And we talked about, say, Black Panthers early on. Many of them basically supported and ran different sects within the Black Panther Party. I mean, they were right there next to the man the entire time. So, yeah, gotta shout out all women, but just recognizing them for that.
So what I'm hearing is, and it makes sense. I mean, anyone who's growing up with the same temptations, it probably wouldn't matter if you're a male or female to a certain extent. But do you think that there might be specific things that women might lure women to a gang that would be different than men?
Maybe a lack of, having a father in the home sometimes. We talk about that a lot. And so when you see this group of men, and if you're not having that sort of male connection at home, or maybe not having your own man at home, now you get that sort of support from the gang of the men that you see. And I'm not saying it's always a great relationship. It could be good at times, but it could also be toxic. So because they may have lacked some of that male role model in the home, just like men need that, but women definitely need that connection as well. So that goes to the gangs to get that from those males, in my opinion.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say trauma in the home, not having, because the male is looked at as the protector. So if a young female doesn't have that example or that protector in the home, she may go out there and seek that protection by any means. And as we stated before, you find yourself in these precarious situations because it's survival mode. It's trauma. So
I'm glad that you brought up, just specifically that word trauma, because what we've learned here at the cause this year in studying that is, obviously you have your adverse childhood experiences, the ACE score and things like that. But they are learning, that trauma is something that you can experience, and in certain neighborhoods you're experiencing trauma. Sometimes they're saying at the same level as people who are in war zones. And so I just wanted to make sure that we put that in there when we're talking about all of this, that trauma is involved. But as a member of the cause, we also understand that whatever trauma you've had, you can possibly get help or support and manage some of your emotions through things of supports, and those supports can be other people. Right. And so that's one of the reasons why we're trying to do these podcasts, is to have everyone at home and the audience know that we are the support systems for the people around us. And hopefully, if we could understand that role, we can enact that role as a trusted support system, and then maybe take a little bit more responsibility in the people around us and things that they're doing. I think that this has been touched upon a little bit about the types of crimes that are done by female gang members. From what I'm hearing about, it sounds like there aren't specific roles as far as the types of crimes. It just goes across the thing. Are there any specific obstacles that women might find within a gang? And I know probably people's minds are going into places probably of sexual abuse, and I'm sure that when we're talking about trauma, there's a lot of probably history of abuse on both sides of the genders. But does anyone want to possibly speak to that? Like, are there any obstacles going on for women that men might not have while they're in the gang?
Well, obviously, we come to the piece where you talked about sexual abuse because of strength, just even, the strength of overpowerment. Most men are stronger than most women. The vulnerability of always being around a group of men is always there. I think that they might have a problem with talking with one of them. It's like a problem of maybe getting out of the gang once they're in. So some of them now are using like a male to basically run that liaison between how to get out and things of that nature. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah. A lot of intimidation. As you mentioned, obviously men are physically just maybe stronger, and using that against a female's what she's capable of, and that she feels forced to be a part of something that she may want to get out of. And that's what I mean, like you put yourself in these situations that, the guy that might have brought you in was like a brother figure. Now he's turning into a sexual monster, or somebody that would abuse you or use you. Now, personally, I didn't witness that, but I know of it. I know of it.
Are there different consequences, or is the process and I remember, Ellis, from your episode that you really don't get out of gangs, like not quite like that.
No.
And for people who want to learn more about that, please go visit the Ellis Rouse episode of Gang Culture. So in that sense, is there any difference, and you had sort of alluded to it, that if a woman's maybe trying to get out of a gang, they might have some sort of man try to negotiate that or something. Is there different ways for women to try to get away from it than men?
I've not witnessed it. Yeah. I haven't seen a man get out, so I can't imagine how a woman can get out.
So it's not like, oh, okay, because you're a woman, we'll let you back out of your commitments.
Yeah. In some cases, I think it would be worse, because a lot of times males share some of the dark secrets with females, and she knows too much. I can't let you out. So that's a part of the culture that you're in. You just know too much.
We're about to open up some questions to the audience here, but I wanted to make sure, is there anything else that we haven't touched upon that you would like to say before we do that? Thanks, Damon.
Yeah, it was a beautiful thing that I saw this past. I'm a huge hip hop fan, and it was a beautiful thing that I saw this past week. Is seeing the Not Like Us, being played over and over again. Shout out to Kendrick Lamar and all those guys on the West Coast. But then at the end of the segment, after he did it 5 times, he brought all those different sects up from different parts of L.A. on the same stage, and showing unity. And at the end of the day, if we as a people in the community were able to come together like that for a great cause, not just for a picture and a photo up and a song, but at least that imagery, and take that energy back to the community and begun to work together, you wouldn't have as much, say, gentrification of our communities and things of that nature. You would have people owning their own homes and having businesses and still maintaining inside their community. So that's something that, gang culture could actually do. Maybe I'm being too, optimistic, I guess, about that. But, that energy painted that picture. And that's for the youth that's sitting out there today and those watching online to take that image and say, hey, maybe we can come together like that. So that thing that Kendrick Lamar and all those different sects of, different parts of the neighborhood out there, he called them sections and whatnot, that image is powerful if used correctly. That's all I got on that.
I could actually speak on that. So another thing that I was doing when I was in my beginning journey of the Bloods is I had a good friend that was a part of the Crips, and I loved him so much that we would go out, we would go hang out in clubs, and one particular night we went out and I went to the bathroom and I got followed by some Bloods that I actually saluted when I walked in, but they followed me into the bathroom and they said, you set tripping. And that means I'm going against our beliefs. And they talked about the guy that I was with and that they wanted to do something to him. And I told them they couldn't. So thank God I got out of there alive. But I was one of we had others that did it, but I was one of the first ones that did things like that. Like Kendrick Lamar had different sections together, what people would think is the ops or the other side. I looked at everyone as brothers and sisters. I didn't see it like that. And because of that, I was challenged, but I think it helped. Because at that time it was a war between the Bloods and the Crips, and it slowed down a lot of the violence that was going on. Because then I would go around his neighborhood and vice versa. They would say things to him, and he would say, "You're not gonna do anything to my brother." So, I think first and foremost, we're humans. You can get caught up in the culture, but you're looking at someone that looks just like you, talks like you as a mother, as a brother, as a sister, as a father, and see that first. That's what I did, and I was able to help in my small area in that capacity, just being an example.
Thanks to our guests, all of the guests throughout the season, and we'll see you next season. But remember, you are someone out there who has a jewel for someone. Take that responsibility serious, and let's help make a better world. Thanks again.